appointed chair of the meeting, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And first of all, we're going to have, we'll tell you what this is. This is the Metropolitan Water District Representative Caucus meeting, and it's also a special board meeting. And that's it. And we'll go ahead and get started. And I gavel the meeting, so now we will have the roll call.
Happy to do so. Director Don Deere. Here. Director Gloria Gray. Director Gray.
She's here.
Director Harold Williams.
Here.
Director Desi Alvarez. And Scott Houston. Returning to Director Gray.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Very good, thank you. We will now have, I can go to item 3, which is public comment. Any public comment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have not received any previous requests for public comment for today's meeting, though this meeting is being held both in person and virtually. If there's anybody in our offices today that would like to make public comment, please let us know. And of course, if there's anybody that is attending virtually, if you'd like to make public comment, please indicate so by raising your virtual hand. And Mr. Chairman, I do not see any requests for public comment.
Okay, then we move to item 4.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have 2 discussion items on today's agenda. The first item is item 4A. It's an update on the proposed California direct potable reuse regulations. And for this presentation, we have Heather Collins, the Water Treatment Section Manager for Metropolitan Water District.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hello. Well, I'm just hoping everyone can hear online. My name is Heather Collins. Thank you for the introduction, AJ, and a pleasure to be here today. Thanks for the invitation. We're going to be talking a little bit about the new regulatory packet for direct potable reuse. Next slide, please. This has been an ongoing topic in regulation for quite a while. I mean, it's going back to the point where I, prior to my time at Metropolitan, I was working for the public health regulator prior to their movement to the state board. And this topic of reuse and regulations has been, a journey. And it is a journey that is long depicted by this photo and this graphic to just sort of give you a perspective of the time and the investment that has gone into this packet. We are under statutory authority, the water boards is to adopt these regulations by the end of 2023. They are on that road, they're on the final road, but of course there's always new information as you near that finish line, right? So we'll talk a little bit about that today. Next slide, please. Back in July, the updated criteria packet was released for public comment, and this was in a format that this was the proposed regulation. What we had seen before were criteria languages, draft kind of languages and so forth, and this was the real first time, well, again, that it went into the regulatory adoption process. And that it was a very, very large packet, both from a regulatory standpoint in the regulatory language and the statement of reason packet. So much so that only 45 days of comment was very, very difficult for everyone who was involved in the space and the sector to digest, understand, try to comprehend ideas, because a lot of these projects in the direct potable space haven't been developed, constructed. They've been talked about and scenarios have been run about, but to kind of, put these regs into implementable mindsets, coming up with ideas, it was a very short time. The California Water Reuse Association has been very involved with this effort, having a technical work group for a better part of a decade. And they were part of the workshop that the water boards held in September. And so with that workshop, they had a panel that delivered testimony. There were also about 14 other agencies, including Metropolitan, that delivered testimony and public comment there. That public comment period closed on the 8th. The water boards have indicated that they received, it was either 16 or 21 letters. They received hex chrome letters at the same time, and the director, Darren Polimas, wasn't sure which one was direct potable reuse and which one was hex chrome, but significant amount of letters, significant amount of comment, to the point where they had planned in December to take an authorizing vote to move this packet to OAL, which is the Office of Administrative Law, which is the regulatory administrative process that it has to go through to get effective into law. Little teaser later on, there will be another comment period because of the effective comments that were received at that meeting in September. So a little bit into where we're going. Next slide, please.
Can I ask a question?
Certainly.
There are a lot of negative comments.
No, the comments were more so about the constructability, the implementation of the language that had been put forth. And I'll get into some of the comments as to where the purveyors, the associations, and other NGO groups and so forth felt that things needed to be more inclusive, broader, implementable from a standpoint of time and space. But we were really happy in the sense that the water boards have been very, active and integrated with the associations and with water companies and everybody else, and taking up and talking about this through the journey. Okay, so on the regulatory engagement side, Metropolitan and its member agencies and associations that we've been involved with have been very, very actively engaged in monitoring the regulations and the framework for the past couple of years. As I mentioned, there have been a number of different drafts through the development framework phase. And we have provided, as Metropolitan earlier, comments on these drafts. We participated in technical work groups, served on advisory committees. We've contributed funds from the standpoint of the direct potable research that was developed and in the science space, so that we've also, engaged in putting this information into publications, and collaborated with the regulators one-on-one and in the aspects of Pure Water Southern California Metropolitan's program through our scientific advisory committees. Our scientific advisory panel, we've provided different scenarios to them and they've given us feedback. So the context has been wide and engaging all along. We did submit a joint letter with our partner agency, Los Angeles County Sanitation Districts, on these regulations. So we have a very collaborative feedback from gaining sense of what the concerns are from the wastewater side of the sector and then the drinking water side of the sector, and then that combination when you bring programs together under sort of a one water concept. A number of associations with involvement, Water Reuse Association California, CMUA, Aqua, AWWA, and others, to name just a few. Next slide, please. So the major provisions for these regulations are shown here. These are like the big chapters, if you will, of what is covered. The big areas of organizational structure, chemical control, and pathogen control. These are the main compliance components of the reg. They require a lot of different things on what you have to remove, what your levels of treatment have to be, what various unit processes you have to engage upon, what you have to monitor for, and what you have to control when you have these systems. And a lot of it does come down to the basic, technical, managerial, and financial accessibility, or the stability of that, the resilience of the agencies involved. Really, while these regs are written for all of California, they have to write a reg for very small systems to very, very large systems. And so with that, they're very complicated, they're very complex, but there's reasons so to ensure public health protection of what we're talking about in the areas of direct potable reuse. Next slide. One thing that when we talk about direct potable reuse, we're past the points of purple pipe, past the points of groundwater recharge with recycled water, and past the point of surface water or reservoir augmentation. We're now talking about direct potable reuse. One of the things along the journey has been the method and the means of that direct potable reuse. Many of us think back to the terms toilet to tap, Back when you're putting things directly from a wastewater facility into a drinking water facility. With raw water augmentation and treated water augmentation, these are the two forms of a direct potable reuse. RWA means taking it to the headworks of an existing water treatment plant. Treated water augmentation is that more direct term where if you have a wastewater facility, advanced treated water facility, you're then taking that and putting it into the pipeline directly of a distribution system of a public water system. So we originally wanted two different types of pathways in this reg. The water boards had said, we can strike a balance, we can combine these packages, save time, efficiency, and write one regulation that will cover both scenarios. Unfortunately, in that space, the requirements for pathogen control are very stringent. The numbers I have up there refer to log reduction values for pathogen control for Giardia, crypto, and viruses. And these are somewhat, we might be familiar with them from the standpoint of public water system, surface water treatment rule, you have to meet certain requirements. Similar type of thought here in which you have to remove, but very, very high levels. And this is one of the aspects that we had wanted to, as an advocating sector in water and wastewater, said, look, we went out, we raised money, we did science research to show kind of what the levels of commensurate levels of treatment for public health protection should be. Well, let's just say that there's an added layer, since we know that the regulators always have an added layer of contingency, that these are very, very high levels. 2014, 15 are very, very high. And this is revision since those 2021 and earlier versions. And they are not moving on this. There have been, and the expert panels that the state has had, let alone the other agencies' panels, have come and said, you don't need to prescribe that high of a level. You can get, commensurate level of health protection for what you're looking at for risk and for consumption and outbreaks and all this, if you kind of went with a whole level lower of like 16, 10, and 11. But they're not willing to budge on that. So this is sort of a non-starter conversation. We've tried again and again and again through this past decade to get that changed, but they're not moving on that. Chemical control, however, though there's been some movement, the regulators have really chosen to adopt what I'll call design criteria by regulation, which is sort of uncommon in the way that they have approached regulatory language before. Typically, they give us performance standards. They give us something to target and what to meet. But now they're getting into aspects of requiring design criteria from the standpoint of having a certain 15-minute empty bed contact time and a certain monitoring interval in your SCADA systems and on your online instrumentation and so forth. And we were very vocal to state, get the design criteria out of the regs. So we've been successful over the different advocacy efforts with utilities associations and other to get at least some better flexibility when it comes to the different empty bed contact times in biological active carbon and in TOC monitoring to get those not as stringent. So it's helpful that we call these small wins. And also from the standpoint of greater flexibility if there's blending or other offsite small little reservoirs that you can take some credit for and so forth. So these are some small wins along the way. Next slide. Source control, when we were talking with our wastewater sector agencies and so forth, they had a watershed monitoring control. Now, with Los Angeles County Sanitation Districts, they work with over 90 different cities and entities in their watershed. And to do monitoring, real-time monitoring in that water or sewer shed, if you will, very, very complicated, right? And so with talking with the regulators and so forth, we got them to say, well, yes, everybody has a source water control and protection programs, early warning monitoring systems and so forth. We will let you monitor that wastewater and some of these source control requirements at the headworks of the treatment plant rather than up in the watershed. That doesn't mean that we're lessening our oversight. It just means that from a standpoint of what they wanted from a real-time online compliance type of monitoring diversion, that doesn't exist really yet in the sense of precision and accuracy and logistics for off-spec, controls and so forth. We'll get there probably in the future, but we still have a way to go. When it comes to staffing and certifications for who's going to operate these systems and what levels of licensing and certification do they need to have, this has been a real vocal standpoint sense in that this is beyond your regular wastewater certification, drinking water certification for treatment and distribution. This is now a new era of advanced water treatment certification. The state does have a program that has been developed through CWEA and Cal Nevada AWWA. The AWTO is a certification that's recognized now by the state. They've put it into the regulatory language, and there's a pathway from those wastewater and drinking water certifications into AWTO, but they're really being very stringent about 24/7 staffing, at least through your first year. Why a first year? Any type of new treatment that is brought online, the state boards have always wanted to ensure that they have 24/7 oversight, and they get a technical report at the end of the year to tell us how it went, lessons learned, what can we do different, and they take that as their mechanism of movement and input to, see what others bring them in terms of proposals. So when it comes to this is going to be an era of new job descriptions, new family pathways in many public sector job families. It's probably a union negotiated item as well. We want more certification, they want more pay. I mean, there's all these issues that are centered around this. And in the past versions, I've talked about now there's 4 versions of this reg. Even the last one they put out in 21, they've changed who has the oversight now of these plants. It used to be the AWTOs and the wastewater folks. Now it's the drinking water folks that have to have the oversight. So when you're talking about how you're going to make arrangements with a partner agency, if you're a public water system with a wastewater system, how you get these agreements going, who's going to do what and where and when and where do they need to be, and anything that you have in compliance with these unit processes, if you say, okay, from A to Z, here's my process, the oversight is that A to Z process. It's not just here's a wastewater oversight, here's drinking water oversight, here's the reuse oversight. It's collective. These are a lot of changes that have not a lot of awareness by folks, but it's going to take a lot because you have to get trained at some of the facilities in order to work at the facilities. So that is a benefit of having some of the demonstration facilities that are out there to train folks and get them the education and the experience they need in order to sit for these certifications. There's a whole host of plans in technical, managerial, and financial. You have to show a capital improvement plan and O&M expenditure. You have to have 5 years of funds in order to support these plans. It goes into the engineering aspects of what you have to have in these proposals that go to the state. So you're talking about when we normally think about budgeting and how long capital improvement plans go for. This is going to put a new kind of twist on some of that. So things to think about. Next slide. So in our comment letter, I'm going to go over some just real high level changes or comments that we had. And this kind of goes to your point, Director Deere, about, were the comments positive, negative, and so forth. It's more about having comments considered for a more implementable, effective regulation that can move over time, be flexible with technology and innovation over time. And when you think about this, I wanted you to think in the context of where we were 30 years ago with reuse and where we are today, and how much advancement in analytics, processes, technology. We've made a lot of progress, right? But there hasn't been regs that have been adopted. They're all in these first generations of regs. And some of the response by the regulators are like, well, if we need to integrate something in the future, we can reopen the reg for you. Well, we still don't have backflow cross-connection regs that have been updated for 30 years. Do you really think they're going to reopen a direct potable reuse reg that only maybe a handful of systems are using? Probably not. So one of the big things is about alternatives. And the alternatives clause, they've had this in their regulatory packets in all previous versions of their reuse. And it is not to be alternative to what the requirements are, meaning if they're requiring this 2014-15 level of health protection and removal of certain chemical constituents and so forth, we're not talking about alternatives to that. What we're talking about is alternatives in their really defined process of, okay, you have to have 4 different treatment processes to get your credit. They have to be in this order and they have to operate in this way. We're trying to say, look, don't be so definitive in that area. Be more open that if we're the ones conducting the research and the development of technology, we should have an avenue to then bring that to you as the water boards, as an alternative that is equivalent to public health protection to meet these regulatory requirements. That's what we want. That is what the sectors want. And that is allowing us to move forward, be innovative, and develop things in the future. So that is the big ask, and that's the big ask across the panel workshop, all the comments that are coming in, and really the main crux of our letter. Other things are online instrumentation. When you think about how the state operates, and even like with the lab accreditations and other things, and you're asked to do some new analysis, there's usually a whole host of instrumentation available out there. It's not like there's one manufacturer or one instrument that everybody uses, or maybe there's 2 and people prefer one because the other one doesn't operate very well. That is the space we're in right now, where we feel like collectively there needs to be a more robust, refined, precise and accuracy in these instrumentation and online monitorings. So we're asking the state to get together and kind of create that that kind of need assessment and assess that there is adequate availability and competitiveness, because they always say, hey, we're not going to speak about, one specific manufacturer, but in a way they sort of are, because there's not many that are available out there. And so for us, for competitiveness and so forth, and for just variability and what we're going to use for operational control versus compliance control and so forth, we feel that there needs to be a more robust advancement in this area before it's required in the regulatory language. Next slide. When it comes to a lot of constituents that they're looking at, constituents of emerging concern, big, buzzword around these days. Everything is, yes, there's required monitoring, required constituents, but then everything else falls into unregulated constituents of emerging concern. What's the hot topic? And they want to kind of roll this in. We want them to have a methodical way of taking in information across the state and running it through a scientific advisory panel to identify and prioritize what it is that is needed in these projects for California. Right now, the way the regs are written, it is a project-specific identification where they negotiate with the purveyor and say, okay, we want you to monitor this in your system because you have, these type of businesses in your sewer shed, and you have this type of industry, that's coming in. So we want you to monitor for this. And it's a year in, year out, I'll call it like a physical, like a painful physical that you have to sit there and negotiate every single year on what it is you're going to monitor for your project. How is that? That's no way to run a project. And that's no way for the environs of California with the governor's water plan and everything that we're looking at, and how we're trying to collectively, inform and cross things in a data front. That is not the way to run this. So we're proposing they have the ability. Last legislative session, Metropolitan and CMUA sponsored a bill, SB 230, which put an allowance of a scientific advisory panel, and they actually put this in the reg. It just needs some funding. So we're getting together now and advocating for some funding opportunities for this opportunity. And the water boards are also with drinking water, with DWQ, and with the regional boards talking about, there's a lot of different scientific advisory panels out there. There's recycled water, there's the, aquatic, and different folks. And we're trying to say, why don't we do some consolidation across, especially if we're talking about One Water, we're talking about the water plan, we're talking about what's good for California, get some efficiency in their processes and get out of their silos, and come together and uniformly, like, let's put this. So that's kind of the idea that we're giving them, to talk about consistency and monitoring requirements, and having that be a good thing for all, rather than this one-on-one project proponent to the state and having to negotiate year to year. The other things with clarifying partner and consecutive system requirements, this is one thing I think that is new to folks, that, and I'll give you a scenario. I'll give you the pure water scenario where LACSD is the wastewater entity, Metropolitan is the public water system entity. In these regulations, we're all getting permits. We're getting NPDES permits, WDR permits, maybe WR permits, and a public water system permit. But Metropolitan is the kind of point on the entity that is enforcing what is needed. And if something goes awry, guess who gets the ding? It's Metropolitan. It's not LACSD. If any system decides along the way to take water and provide additional treatment that makes their own DPR, you are now part of the consecutive system, or the whole program component. And now you have to comply with what we're all complying with as well. And so what we're stating is that, this is somewhat different in the way that Safe Drinking Water Act is put together, with consecutive systems and public water systems and indemnifications and liabilities, that everybody has sort of separate entity systems. So we're making them aware that the way they've written things are not very clear. I think it's a way that they actually bridge the legislative statutory authority between Clean Water Act and Safe Drinking Water Act. And they're kind of saying, well, we're gonna, you want to do it for reuse for purposes of drinking water source and so forth. So we're going to look to the drinking water entity to be the host to ensure that everybody's doing what they need to do. And we said, that's a lot. Not that we can do it, but it is a lot. And I think that everybody else needs to be aware that if they're a point of connection, or if they want to have other things that they're thinking about in their water planning portfolios, that they need to be aware that they would then be tied to a lot of these requirements. And then also from a standpoint of reporting, collection, monitoring, wastewater systems are on a certain regimen, certain frequency. Drinking water is on that, but yet they wanted everybody to report on the same routine frequencies, and a lot of that is out of sync. And I don't think they realized that when they put in, they put in dates like, okay, the month after the monitoring, you got to have everything by the 10th or the 15th. Things don't work that way when you mesh these two together. So bringing awareness to that as well. Next slide. So just kind of in the broad brush of conclusions, the alternatives clause is really where everybody's at. We really want them to think about it. We hope, and I mentioned earlier, that because of the comments received, the water boards is reopening, and they will have a second round of comments. We're hoping that these are some of the areas that they have heard from everyone, and that they will adapt and put some new proposals out there. One thing I think everybody's a little bit kind of mindful of is that in California, we don't have direct potable reuse experience. And you might be aware of like other areas in the US, with Texas, with Big Springs, with others. Mind you, those were not planned reuse projects under regulatory framework. Those were a desperation motion in times of no water. So this is different. I will tell you that the California regulators, when asked about the other states, whether it be Florida, Arizona, Virginia, Texas, Colorado, they say, don't even bring those other requirements and frameworks into our house. We are California. We know what we want, and it's very complex and complicated, more so than every one of those other states that I mentioned. And they're in the mindset of ensuring that there will not be a mishap of reuse in the direct potable sense happening in the watch of California. So that's why these things are very, very complex. And that's kind of that next point of complexity and coordination. So just making sure the innovation and the technology front was really the message of let's keep us moving forward and being flexible. And that's why this alternatives clause is just really, really important. And for my last slide, I did mention that I think, we're all very positive in the space that this this effort is moving California into that, more forward movement of potable reuse, which is great. And yes, it's, unfortunate they had to take a statutory requirement to get them there. But I think it's a good thing because we'll learn more. And I think we do have a really good, strong relationship with the regulators. We do worry about a lot of the institutional mindset and knowledge that probably is set to turn out here in the next 5 years. I think in the next 30, you'll see a whole new entourage of folks there. And hopefully they pass on a lot of that knowledge exchange to their new folks there. This does give us a very clear pathway to what we need to do for our pure water program, which is helpful. And we do have these letters on our website of the comments that we've given. So those are available. And then we're going to be preparing for the next 15-day comment period. We haven't heard when it's going to be yet. It might be sometime in October. And mind you, though, the next comment period, this next one for the 15-day, is only open to the revisions that they bring. You cannot go back to what was already released back in July. That's the nuance of a second 15-day comment period. Happy to take any questions.
Okay. Great presentation. Very good. A lot of information there. And some of it sounds a little scary, but we'll go on. Don, any questions?
No, very, very thorough. Thank you.
Anyone else online? Come on, folks. Yes, EJ.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Heather, you mentioned the proposed regulations related to direct potable reuse are helping that to guide Pure Water Southern California. When you look at Senate Bill 918, it differentiates between the different types of direct potable reuse, raw water augmentation versus drinking water augmentation. Met so far has not stated that they're exploring the flange to flange, the true or the holy grail of direct potable reuse. But as you respond to the draft regulations and you continue to work on this, are you working hand in hand with your Pure Water team to look and see if that's possible? I know it's not contemplated in the EIR, the CEQA documentation so far, but are you looking at it?
So right now we're looking at Pure Water in a hybrid sense. We have plans right now for our first phase, which is 115 MGD, that will take advantage of having industrial water through purple pipe. It'll have the groundwater recharge component through spreading or direct injection, and it'll have the raw water augmentation component that takes a certain blend up to the treatment plants. The aspect of what you talked about in treated water augmentation, I know there's one of your directors, Director Alvarez, has asked a lot of questions, and one of the committee presentations at our subcommittee was deferred to November, so we'll be answering more directly his questions about treated water augmentation at that meeting. But it is something that we would look at maybe for the second phase of the project, which ultimately is the build out of 150 MGD, which then would take a lot more of the component above 90 MGD for direct potable reuse. So we're looking into that because that would require additional pipelines, additional treatments, and kind of where and how water use changes as far as, are the demands still the same? Are the areas of replenishment the same, or where are they similar or different? The reason why we've kind of looked at this hybrid approach for the first 115 MGD is it gives us a lot of flexibility, because you have flexibility in that sometimes your groundwater basins may not be available. If you're looking sort of on a 90% online of a plant, how you base load that and so forth, you want to have the water that's being produced have somewhere to go. And so we feel that kind of hybrid triple bucket approach is the best approach for this first phase. So it's not part of the EIR right now, but I know it's a question that has come up. So.
Very, very, very good. Very interesting. Now, in order to move to this level of direct potable reuse, we're going to have a whole different level of trained, certified plant operators? Where are they coming from?
Very good question. We hope that there's, right now, the way that the regulations for advanced water treatment operator certification are set up is that you have to have a minimum on the wastewater or the treated side as a grade 3 equivalent, kind of on both sides, wastewater 3 or T3 on drinking water. And you could sit for these exams. So we hope that the existing population of staff has interest, both from LACSD and Metropolitan. We will probably view like a hybrid team probably. We hope, and we're going to develop a pathway in this next 10 years because our online date would be 2032 for our first phase, to have them kind of identified and start integrating and working with our demonstration facility. And I think also one of the challenges though is because we are a very large entity over a multi-county area, there's some people that may not want to travel, that far. So there could be other interest locally, but we're going to have to, it's definitely a new pathway that we're going to have to, let people know what that pathway is because they want to know and they're interested in it, but it also requires work on their behalf. So I do think that it will be developed. Right now, there's about 135 or 143 AWTO certified operators in the state. So people are taking the exams, and there are trainings out there, and there are pathways that they can follow. So I think a lot of people are gearing up for it. And then we have to, as purveyors, develop our own pathway programs and let them know what that pathway is for that next decade.
Okay. Will I have to be concerned about AI, since this is kind of you can train to become an operator. Am I going to have to be concerned about AI?
So it's a good question. I think AI comes into aspects of forecasting and modeling and operational scenario planning. I don't think it's one that you're going to look at replacing the human component of integrating and operating a system. I think it'll be a tool in their toolbox. We're going to look at digital twins, and especially when you look at operational scenarios, with the flexibility of Metropolitan system and sources and demands, and how we swing around from different blends and different demands. I think we'll be using a lot of those AI tools for those scenarios and model planning. But the fundamental hands-on monitoring and decision-making will still be left in the operator's hands initially.
Very good. Any more questions? Come on, folks. We paid a lot to get her here. Come on.
I'll make a comment. So I'm Russ Bryden from District 29, just up the hill where you're a retailer.
Okay.
But I also had another job for a number of years at the county doing stormwater. On the stormwater side, we had low flow diversions and other things, but our electromechanics, or I should say that the flood control district's demand for electromechanics, with all of the Measure W, all the stormwater projects coming out, is extreme. We're having quite a bit of trouble filling those vacancies right now. I can tell you, in terms of the county waterworks districts, we have probably 50,000 accounts up in the Antelope Valley, maybe 50 or 60,000 accounts up in the Antelope Valley. We get at least a third of our demand from production for groundwater wells. The chromium 6 MCL that's being contemplated will wipe out at least half of that. And so we're being forced to go, there's no more imported water to have. We're being forced to go to wellhead treatment. We have no idea where we're going to get the workforce to run that wellhead treatment. And so this project, I think, is going to run smack dab into an industry crisis of trying to figure out where we're going to get all the skilled labor to do this. And I wonder, is West Basin doing anything in that space? Do you have internship programs? Are you going to schools and encouraging young folks to do that, to pursue careers in that field?
West Basin?
West Basin, yeah.
No. Metropolitan is. Since West Basin, we don't operate really a water treatment plant. We buy water, imported water from different sources, but no. And I think it has to go further than much broader than West Basin. It has to be like Metropolitan Water District and the county. I think the county is better at it than we would be, because we don't have we just don't have the customers to sell water to like that. We sell the water that we get from Metropolitan, and we give it to the local folks here, you know. So, but I see a big problem coming, because for every large movement like this for infrastructure, we have this issue. And even the federal government with jets, things for wars, have the same problem. But since they have a much bigger place to draw money from, they can take care of that. They can, all of a sudden they have a jet, for example. They'll have like during the war, we had the were those guys, those black guys from Tuskegee Airmen. Remember that? You hear about that? A lot of people have. Okay, so the America needed some jet pilots, some not jet pilots, but you know, it goes back so far I don't remember anything. Props. But anyway, they trained folks they needed for that war. And I think that's what we're going to have to do as we get closer to having direct portable reuse. Because you talk to a young kid in college today, no, I don't want to do that. What is that? So we're going to have to start little what do you call it? Marketing to get these folks who want it. So there's going to be step, because we know that for infrastructure projects have a bad reputation. They take longer to complete than originally estimated and cost a whole bunch more than originally estimated. So by the time that you know you get out of college and you're ready to go, things have changed. So there's a different need. So how are you going to get those folks who whatever they want to do, that what they've learned will help them as they try to go forward. Like for us, back in the day, it was all the same mathematics and science, right? I mean, you had 10 years, 5 years, 15 years, and that tool, those tools are still good in your toolbox. So how are you going to do that with this? Because when is the future for our direct portable reuse? When is the future?
2032 will be an online date. And to speak to some of your concerns and so forth, I can offer one of the things Metropolitan did in last legislative session, we went to and sponsored a bill to allow us to do progressive design build delivery alternative methods, which will hopefully, you know, help with the efficiency of our programs. And we also adopted a project labor agreement to bring, you know, a greater equity, I think, to the unionized workforce and those that are eligible. And we have a lot of workforce development programs. Tana could probably speak about some of those too when she comes up, but there's a whole effort to do outreach and development to underserved communities and into industries and get into high schools and younger education from the standpoint of awareness about what the skill sets are needed for our utility workforce, and to hopefully then create those job opportunities so that when, I mean, everybody's in a workforce dilemma, no matter who you talk to, right? Yeah. So one of the things, the LA Economic Council did a report for us for pure water and identified that there could potentially be about up to like 50,000 jobs created from the standpoint of this pure water program. So, and I think that's collectively too across our service area that it brings that awareness to everybody. And so But truly, it is kind of getting and reaching out to those folks that are in their formidable educational years of high school or prior, and really letting them know what the skill sets are, to not be the TikToker influence, but to be the really, the sustainable career folks that really have some pride in what they're doing day to day.
Agree 100% there. Yes.
And Mr. Chairman, I just want to touch on a few things that were discussed and asked about by Russ, and then your comments as well. I want to give Metropolitan Water District a great deal of credit, along with LA County and LADWP, West Basin, of course. We've been participating in working groups, LA or Infrastructure LA, and then of course an internal working group at Metropolitan Water District where we're talking about pure water and of course Hyperion Operation Next. And workforce development is a key topic or an important topic in every one of those discussions. I've not heard any agency waver as to the importance of this effort. Secondly, West Basin is in the process now of developing outreach materials. We've already been networking and working with El Camino College and LA Trade Tech. It is a part of our curriculum for every group of students that travel through the ECL, that they learn about what, not just about water, which we've always taught them, but also about the industry and the jobs and the opportunity within that industry. And then thirdly, West Basin took a very proactive approach earlier this year. Legislation was introduced, Assembly Bill 735 by Assemblymember Berman. And it's worth noting that the bill quickly died. There was a significant funding price tag to it. It went to appropriations and the bill didn't pass out. West Basin's board of directors actually took a support position on that bill after it had died to help promote this cause. We're now working with our lobbyists in Sacramento to kind of breathe some life back into this legislation. It's a Workforce Development and Opportunity Act that would actually pay for educational opportunities to get people trained to do these jobs. So there is a significant effort underway by all of these different agencies. I think West Basin's in the middle of that. And to just show you kind of the level of, I would say, cooperation, just last week we were notified by BizFed that they're hosting a workforce development fair in the city of Los Angeles. And West Basin quickly contacted LADWP and Metropolitan Water District to ask about co-sponsoring a large booth to promote jobs in this sector. And both agencies jumped at that opportunity immediately. That's not something that always happens, that we all come together, we can share one booth and promote the jobs that are here. So I think there's a great deal of effort being invested in this topic. And I think that over the next few years, you're going to really see a movement in the number of people that are trained to do these jobs, the number of people that are searching out for these jobs, and then of course the people and families that are benefiting from these jobs. So I'm excited about that.
Very good. And I just like to say that I understand that. And what's important is that we need to keep talking about that. Every opportunity we get, we need to talk about that.
Agreed. And I just want to point out that we do have Devin Apadier with us virtually, and he has raised his hand. I assume to talk about this subject as well.
Okay, well, tell him to come on in because we don't have much time left.
Well, thank you, EJ. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, good afternoon, EJ and Chair Williams. It's good to see you. I just was listening in, and on this particular topic, I think you guys hit the nail on the head. I really wanted you to be aware that for us, we see this at Metropolitan as a very, very serious issue that we've got to hit head on. We have developed internal apprenticeship programs. Director Williams, as you know, at Metropolitan, these are programs where folks go through them, and in 4 years, they come out of those apprenticeship programs as full journey level trades folks that are then able to have full-time work at Metropolitan. One of the things I wanted to mention that you guys didn't touch on is, particularly for Met, and it gets to Russ's comment earlier, we have had a history of being kind of the stealth infrastructure that people don't really see. But the fact is that it's underlying their cities, and in some cases, it's going right through streets in front of their homes, and they don't know it's there. And as we have had to get in to refurbish that infrastructure, in some cases, as an example, the second lower feeder that's right in West Basin service area, we've used that as an opportunity to communicate with the homeowners and the folks that are living in the area right around our facilities as we're refurbishing those facilities. So while it might feel like it's a disruption, we've got our external affairs teams going out there saying, this is who we are, this is why we're repairing these facilities. And by the way, you might want to think about looking at our job postings and getting it on the map for folks as we're working in their communities. So it's a key thing. The one other thing I wanted to touch on is EJ mentioned the project labor agreement. We approved a major project labor agreement that actually covers 90% of the work in our CIP. And one of the pieces of that is a real advantage for us is to use the trades organization's pre-apprenticeship program that they run that's super successful, that does a great amount of outreach, particularly into underserved communities to get people interested in the trades, to feed in to our apprenticeship program at Metropolitan. So just wanted you to know that this is an area where we have to be innovative, and we very much agree with your thoughts in terms of focusing on this going forward to basically tap areas of talent that we haven't been able to tap as much in the last decade. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Anyone else?
I think District 29 is going to steal that idea, Deb.
That's called technology transfer, not thievery.
Technology transfer.
Anyone else? Well, what's next? Because the clock is ticking on us here.
Understanding that, we'll move directly to the next item. It's 4B. It's a presentation on the draft long-range finance plan needs assessment. And for this presentation, we do have a team from Metropolitan Water District, including Katano Kasane, the Assistant General Manager and Chief Financial Officer, Adam Benson, the Finance Group Manager, and Sam Smalls, the Treasury and Debt Manager for Metropolitan Water District. Katano, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon,
Hi,
EJ.
Katano.
Hi, and I do have a quick question because I thought this meeting was scheduled for till 1:30. So how much time do we have? Because
it typically does run until about 1:30, but I think we have an extra
15 minutes.
15 minutes.
Okay, so 15 minutes. Most of us have meetings at 1:30, but I will push and give our team to, because I had a so I don't know how many of you have seen our presentation. Again, I'm sorry, Katano Kasane, Metropolitan Water District. We have a long presentation, so we're not going to attempt to go through it in 15 minutes. We're happy to revisit this. But a couple of things I want to say to you guys, that this has been, we've been going to different caucuses and the board. So if you're ever watching our long-range finance, our long-range planning committee, subcommittee that we've presented there, we've presented in finance, we will be back in our finance committee with the same topic for questions and answers. So if we miss you today, please tune into our finance committee and you'll hear us taking questions on the same topic. The one thing that I want to update this board is that we are making a few tweaks and changes to this document. One of the key things we're going to do is a scenario reflecting of long-range finance, a scenario that goes to 2045. So the next time in November we bring this document, it will be a little bit different from what you see online today. So that's one key aspect that we're doing. We've also been answering questions from folks from the San Diego Water Authority. We've also answered some external questions. So if you look at our website, we've posted some of those memos, and we'll continue to take in questions as needed. My hope is that this long-range finance plan need assessment phase 1, we're calling it phase 1, and that is because we do want to go through the CAMP process to determine the portfolio of projects, and as far as the evaluation of those portfolios, we will then come back and give you an updated document reflective of those new portfolios, this document is a base document based on our last IRP. It is also reflective of our last 10-year focus. So if you're looking at it, it's really a toolbox that gives the CAMP process a tool they can use to gauge as they develop the portfolio of those projects. So I will stop there and really take questions within the few minutes we have. We are happy to take slides and talk about it, or give you and just open this up for questions about the process and what we're doing.
Katana, thank you for that quick overview. And I think that this is definitely a topic that's extremely important to West Basin Municipal Water District. I know that you had conversations with one of our Metropolitan Water District directors, Director Desi Alvarez. He has definitely some questions and thoughts about this too. I think in the best interest of time, why don't we just plan to reschedule this, and I can work directly with you as far as when would be the best time for you, and of course, the best time to kind of come in and get into the details of this. Again, I think it's just too important of a subject matter to just briefly run through it. So
Yeah,
I don't know if
I
anybody has
totally
any
agree.
questions.
Oh, Katana, can you come back?
Absolutely, especially to see you, even though it's only online. Absolutely.
very
And
good.
one thing I was gonna say is let us come closer to November, because then we will have the updated document. But we absolutely will be happy to come back and have a discussion with you.
Well, thank you. We can come back for our November meeting.
That'd be
Yeah,
great.
before the November meetings, absolutely.
Well, it has to be the November meeting.
Yes, November meeting or before our November, the caucus is right before our November meetings, correct? Right?
That would be
EJ?
November 1st. November 1st, right?
Is that when you have it?
November 8th.
November
Caucus meeting?
8th. November 8th?
No, not on my calendar. In November?
We had November 1st on this calendar.
Well, I have the wrong calendar.
No, not so you do.
We'll
work it out.
Yeah,
We'll work it
uh,
out with EJ, but we definitely come back, and we don't have to come when you have a meeting. We can have it any morning if you can arrange.
perfect.
That
That'll
works,
work then.
okay. Thank you.
We'll do it. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Katana.
Good seeing you.
Thank
All right,
you very
good
much,
seeing you
Heather.
too. Bye-bye. Thanks,
Bye now.
team. Bye.
Okay, that takes us to item 5. Is that right?
That is correct.
All right then. But before we go there, any questions from folks inside the meeting here? Better get your licks in now. Okay, if not, then this meeting is adjourned. Our next meeting is the whatever date.